Hi everyone! Today I'm very happy because I'm with Elisa Polese from Speak from Day One with Elisa. Hi Elisa, how are you?
Hi, I'm very good, thank you. What about you?
I'm fine. I'm happy to have you here. So I prepared a series of questions for you because I think your language background, your experience teaching languages and learning languages, because you have learned a bunch of languages. We'll speak about that. So this experience is really interesting for all the people listening to us. So first, the very first question I usually ask is if you can introduce a little bit yourself, focusing maybe on your language background.
Sure, I define myself as a language lover above all because this is where everything started. And then I learned many languages, still for my passion, not because I wanted to do something particular, because I liked it very much. Um, and uh, and then I transform it into my job. And so I'm so grateful that I actually do what I love. I studied 25 languages and I teach 13 of them. I learned the other languages because I'm fascinated by the way languages work, and above all because behind languages there are mentalities, way of thinking, cultures. As far as my background is concerned, I decided that I wanted to study languages when I was 8, only because I went to Paris and I fell in love with French. But I didn't know how to learn languages. So what happened is that I was very bad at learning languages until I was 14, 16. But then I really understood how to learn languages only later when I went to the university. I studied translation and interpreting at university, and then I studied to be a teacher, so I have a master in didactics, and I also have the certificate from Cambridge University, the CELTA, to teach English.
Okay. Okay, great. We have not mentioned a curiosity. So we both come from Naples in Italy. So you're Italian, and all these studies were in Italy or in another country, or half and a half. I don't know. You studied only in Italy or also in other parts of the world?
I have itchy feet. I don't like to be always in the same place, and I wanted to study what I really loved. So I started in Naples, but I must say that I wasn't very happy with the level of the education. Above all, the organization, not really the level, but the way, which was very traditional, and also the organization, which was close to zero. I studied in Bologna, University of Bologna, the interpreting school of the University of Bologna. And then I studied, actually, I didn't mention, you want to mention everything I studied. I love studying. So I also have a master from the University of Modena, which is also in north of Italy, in communication and international organizations. And then during my studies, I spent 1 year in the UK. I spent some time in Switzerland, also as an exchange program. And I also spent some time in Germany.
Okay, great, great. Okay, so if we go back to languages, so you mentioned 25 languages. This is impressive. So you learned 25 languages. You teach 13 of them. So I'm sure that you mastered those languages because otherwise you could not teach them. I know that it's a tricky question for everyone, and especially for you because you speak so many languages. But if you should mention the ones which you speak better, what are those languages?
I can tell you the ones which are closer to my heart. French was my first love, not a guy, really just French. And
The language.
yes, so I
Okay.
really love Russian. I really like it. I really like German and Greek, Hindi, and
Okay.
other languages. So I don't want to exclude the other ones, but I must admit that when I hear something in Russian, Greek, Hindi, French, and German, my eyes are
Okay.
really.
Okay. So yeah, you have a lot of experience with teaching and learning languages. I'd like to know what are your very first steps when you start learning a language? So because we have different approaches, you know, we are all different. So I know that some people can start with an aspect of the language, other ones with other skills. So they try to develop other skills. So what are your first steps?
Okay. First, I look for material which I like, I enjoy, I know that it's useful, and is above all it's reliable, because I want, of course, to be learning from something. I don't want to learn something which is wrong. But the most difficult part, I think, is to find something which I enjoy, because now, after studying many languages, I know what it works for me, but also for, let's say, anyone else, more or less. And I know that I don't want the traditional book. I really want something which makes me speak from the very beginning. And so the first thing is finding something I can rely on and I can study with every day. I don't want to study for hours on end. I don't have the time, but I do think it is possible, if you have the right material, to study and to see results. So it's one, what you study. The second is the method. And then the other two things I do, I listen a lot to the language, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to understand people. And I listen to the language even though I don't understand anything at the beginning, because our brain has to adjust to it. We have to understand when a word starts and when a word ends. So this is very important to me, and this is my way to learn vocabulary or to revise vocabulary, because important words always come up again. But again, you have to choose the material carefully, because for example, if I love talking to people, what I focus on at the beginning are dialogues or something that I can use in conversation. Maybe if I don't know, if you love cooking, then start listening to many things about cooking. So at least you will have the vocabulary that you will need when you want to speak. But if you talk, so your interests should also be a part which helps you choose the material you want to study. And
Okay, great.
yeah, and then the last thing is speaking. So sometimes we forget it. The third thing that I really do when I want to learn a language is to start speaking it as soon as possible. In my case, as my motivation is speaking, if I were to study a language for 1 year and then start speaking, I would have lost my motivation long time before. So this is why it's very important for me to organize things in a way that I can speak as soon as possible.
This was one of my next questions, you know, because you have a website called Speak from Day One with Elisa. Of course, day one is a way to say speak early, so speak as soon as possible, I guess. Yeah, my question is how, because you know they can say that you're smarter because you have a lot of experience with languages. They can say many things. So Elisa can do that because she has a lot of experience. She teaches languages. But how a normal person, maybe with who is struggling with language learning, can possibly start speaking so fast, so quickly? What are your tips to speak as soon as possible?
I must admit that I really mean from day one. So I I don't mean in 1 week, I mean from day one. Of course, what I can say on day one is not the same that I will be able to say on day 10, but I can start speaking and
Okay,
anyone
so
can
it's
start
really day
speaking.
one. It's really day
Yes,
one. So
it's
okay,
really day one.
my bad. It's still day one.
No, it's not a problem. So let's say that you want to study a difficult language, something that is difficult for many people. Of course, difficult depends on your mother tongue and on the other language or languages that you have studied. So what I think when I say speaking from day one is, for example, if you learn with me, I would say it depends on the language. I would say, for example, Zavut. Can you say that? Zavut.
Zavut,
Minia.
Minia,
Minia Zavut.
Minia Zavut,
Minia Zavut Elisa.
Minia Zavut Luca, no?
Yes, perfect. So, and for example, I would say, Меня зовут Elisa. Yeah? Как тебя зовут?
Minia Zavut Luca.
Yeah, so you don't even need to understand my question, because from the
It's the
context,
context.
yes, from the context, you already know what I want from you. I cannot be asking, what did you eat yesterday? Yeah. So,
Okay.
yeah, so you can start speaking any language. And the way, for example, I teach is I help you then seeing the patterns. For example, for, let's say, for example, for Italian, you're Italian, but let's say all Italian verbs end with o in the first person. Parlo, mangio, credo, voglio, vado, even the irregular ones. So normally I help you seeing the pattern, and then I ask you to apply it in together in a practical way so that you can start speaking from the very beginning. So this is what I mean by speaking from day one. And when it's about me, so when I'm learning language, of course I cannot help myself learning a language, because if I don't know how it works, I cannot teach it to myself. But what I do is that I know what I want to be able to say. I want to be able to have conversations when I go either to parties or when I meet people, when I travel. So I know what kind of conversations I want to have. And on the base of that, once I've chosen my material, I start selecting what I learn on the basis of what I want to be able to say. So even if in that language, or for that language, there is only material about booking a hotel. Okay, not perfect. There are some languages I've studied and I cannot find good material for that, or I couldn't find good material for that. And what I do is that I make the best out of what I already have. For example, I say, okay, maybe I don't need certain words, but I do need the word breakfast. And then I try to combine in a sentence that I might use. For example, what time do you have breakfast? If I have friends coming over, I want to know what time they would like to have breakfast. So
Sure.
according to what I want to say, I try to select what I see and what I hear so that I can use it in speaking immediately. So for sure, the last thing I learned at the beginning are numbers, because I wouldn't say, Luca, 1, 2, 3. And then what about the conversation? It's really, I cannot really have such a conversation. Even the directions. I have my theory is that if my level is very bad, even if I can ask you that question, I will never understand what you want to tell me. So maybe the only thing I would learn about directions is to have either a map or my mobile, according to the country I am in, and then asking, can you show it on the map? This is useful. But saying, shall I go left and right? If you think of German, where you ask one question I know that you are learning or that you already have a certain level of German. I think that you already know that that vocabulary used in German is not like, okay, I will only use A1. So when people talk to you, they mix not because they do something wrong, just because in German they use many more words at a basic level. There are languages like Italian and Spanish where even if you only know 500 words or 1000 words, you can get by. Maybe you will not have the best grammar ever, but they will understand you and you will understand them. In German, unfortunately, this is not the case. The minimum to have a normal conversation is 2000 words. So, of course, it's much more difficult. And from that point of view, then what is important is to start, not to be stopped by the fact that you don't understand everything they are telling you. Just being open and understand also from the conversation of what you are there talking about. So something that sometimes I say is that if you go to a restaurant, there are many ways waiters can talk to you. Haben Sie schon gewählt? Or was möchten Sie trinken? Yeah, so different ways. And they're all a bit complicated, but you don't need to understand them at the beginning. Later, of course, you want to understand everything, but at the beginning, what can they ask you in a restaurant? What you want to eat, what you want to drink. So start with that.
Okay, so now, Elisa, I'd like to speak about something more general. Okay, we talked about speaking. So I know that you are a language teacher, a language coach. You learned many languages, and you help people learn a language. So I'd like to know if you have identified the keys, the tips to learn a language quicker, faster, or better. So how, for example, your students succeed, and how do you help them? So what are the one or two things that you do and that makes the difference, change the game, in your opinion?
So, in my opinion, the most important part is to focus on the right things, but with the right method which fits you, because there is no such a method which fits everyone. If you really want to speak and you really want to read, there are methods to help you learn the language without speaking. I mean, everyone is different, so whatever motivates you, because there are two key factors. Actually, there is one more that I want to mention, but the main factor is that if you spend time, lots of time, on something which is not helpful to you, and which does not serve your highest priority, your highest goal. What is your highest goal? Speaking. Then you have to concentrate and focus on those activities which help you speaking. And they are not only speaking, of course. You cannot say I want to speak and not speaking. Yeah, because otherwise it's like wanting to drive without trying it yourself. So you have to do it anyway. But there are other activities, so language structures, vocabulary, and lots of listening. So there are certain strategies which still help you reach your goal in a faster way than other things. So focus on the right things and on the right material, because I don't know what you think about, let's say, courses or way of learning a language with a list of words which are not useful to you. So a list can be very useful if it contains words which are really good for you, and a list can be very useless if contains words which are too difficult for your level. For example, I remember, I think on Memorize, there was I had a student who was studying with that, and he said, oh, I struggle with that word, but it was really A1. It's not even A1. It was starting to get towards A1, and the word was patristaioshi. So come on, you cannot learn such a long word when you just started learning a language, and it just means fantastic. And there are many other ways to express the same content without saying. I don't know if you have ever learned Polish. I started learning Polish not so long ago, and I can tell you that the thing which puts me off the most is the pronunciation. Is not the easy thing ever. And if I look at certain books to learn Polish, you see that words are not chosen in a way that don't make you run away. I mean, so it's
Yeah,
so.
I understand what you mean. Yeah, I understand what you mean. Yeah.
And so focus on the right things. Use a method which suits you. That means, by that I mean, you can decide, for example, anyone let's talk about something specific, European languages. Anyone needs to know verbs. There is no way around that. At least some verbs, conjugations, some tenses. You don't need to do everything, but you do need to know how to express the future, how to express the past, if you want to have a conversation. So, having said that, learning verbs can be done in different ways. If you're a person who loves grammar, you want to learn from A to Z, okay. But there are many people who are not like that. So you can learn verbs in a way which are, for example, which is much more practical. For example, looking for the pattern, applying the pattern to conversations which are useful to you. So this is what I mean. Focus on the right things, for example, verbs or certain verbs, and then you apply the method which suits you, which I think is very, very important, because let's say that you have the best book ever, you find it very boring, you don't know how to work with it, you will still quit. So this is why it's so important to find the right method for you. And then
Okay.
and then the other thing which is very important is treat yourself kindly. Maybe you are someone who is very self-confident, but according to the experience I have, most people say, most adults say, I cannot learn this language is very difficult, pronunciation is very difficult, or when they cannot remember one word, I should have known it, why I cannot remember it. And I understand it because I was in the same situation many years ago when I started learning German. I went to Germany and I said, I'm going to learn German in 3 weeks. Ah, no, not, but I didn't know how to learn languages at the time. I only knew French. German is my second language, even before English. So I went to German speaking only French and Italian, of course, and which wouldn't help in Germany many years ago,
No, no,
and not
not a
even
lot.
French, not even French. So in a way, it helped me because no one would speak French where I went, at least. So I had to speak either German or German because there was not a way. But at the same time, I remember the frustration because after 3 weeks, I learned a lot, but I didn't learn the language, obviously. So what happened is that at a certain point I was frustrated and a bit angry at myself. I was, hey Lisa, why cannot you learn? Yeah. So the sounds. So in German there are two ch sounds. One is h and the other one is sh. I couldn't do. I couldn't make the sound sh. And so what I was frustrated. I wasn't enjoying learning languages anymore, or German in that particular case. And then at a certain point, I must say, I don't normally drink, I must say, but on that evening I drank a glass of wine, and this wine, since I don't normally drink, it was enough to make me feel a bit tipsy. And I said, I started to make the sound for fun because I was a bit tipsy. And at a certain point, it came out. And I just understood not only, okay, that if I'm not relaxed, I'm not going to get the results I want. But then I thought, okay, but if you are so stressed because you are not learning as fast as you would like, of course, you cannot absorb the information you are trying to put in your brain, because your brain is processing all this frustration. So the second really important point is that is normally completely left out. I know that you told me that not in your app, but in traditional books, of course, is a bit left out, and it's a pity because it's a very important component. If you only think about the fact that the most adults think, if I were a child, I would learn that language very, very well, and I cannot. If you think that a child, before speaking, let's say that a child can have a conversation when a normal, so almost normal conversation when it's 3, before 3 years old, he cannot really have a conversation. So
Sure.
can you imagine 365 days times 3 times at least 8 hours a day where the child is exposed to the language, either because the child listens to the parents or TV or something else. I mean, we're talking about 10,000 hours exposures. So they are not necessarily better, but they have lots of exposure. So it's a false myth. Of course, they are much better in pronunciation. This is no doubt. But about learning, adults can really find the motivation to learn. And if they treat themselves kindly, they can even learn faster. Because if I go to a child and say, look, learn this word because there is a pattern. Oh, come on, he's not learning through patterns that way, because it's maybe he doesn't even know what an adjective is, what a verb is. He doesn't know his own language. So of course he or she cannot apply the same pattern to other words. So a child learns through experiences, by doing, and by having fun. So why not having fun ourselves and use the what we have inside and the strength as adults to focus and to be determined, to set a goal and stick to it. So a daily goal, stick to it. I mean, this is very important. So focus on the right things, using a method which fits you, and treat yourself kindly. And the last one is consistency. So consistency is really a key, but you have to focus on the right things. If you do every day the wrong thing, of course, you're not going to get the results you want. So, but once you find what works for you or what your aim is, so you can choose your activities according to that, then you can, if you are consistent, no matter how good or bad you are at learning languages, you will learn the language. I mean, if I want to walk every day, after 1 year, I would have walked 365 kilometers, and for most people, this is a crazy amount. So can you imagine if you work a bit every day, how much you can learn in a language? And I can assure you that and you know it very well, actually, it's not really for you, but that the main problem is that people quit. So if you do the other 3 steps correctly, you are not going to quit, because you're going to enjoy the process. It's not stressful, it's not overwhelming, and you are focused on something which brings you forward, so you stay motivated, and then you can do it every day because you enjoy it, you see the results. In the end, you will learn the language. This is
Yeah, so I really, well, you said a lot of very interesting things. Just to react about the last one, which is very important, is, you know, we both go to polyglot gathering and conferences. So with some polyglots, we are even friends, and we speak a lot. And you know, people are always asking for the secrets, you know, because they listen to well, there are some of them are really brilliant, and so even in terms of pronunciation, I'm really admirative of them. So it's they're doing a great job. But when they speak with them, you realize that languages are part of their life, and they spend a lot, or they have spent a lot of hours learning languages. And I think if there is a secret, is that they study a lot, they expose themselves a lot to the language, and languages are part of their life. So as you said, consistency and this regularity, and the fact of exposing yourself a lot to the language you want to learn, your target language, it's really important. So yeah, this is some, and I always think when I speak with polyglots and people who speak so very well languages, it's not because they have a natural gift, or they have something, a kind of superpower. Some of them are really good at picking the right sounds. This is true. This is something that you can see the differences. But in terms of the mastery of the language, it's because they expose themselves a lot to the language. And as you said, you know that I have two sons, and it's really fascinating to observe how they learn languages, especially because my first one is 4 years old at the moment I'm speaking, and he's learning 3 languages. And already he asked me to teach him English, because he's very interested in languages. And it's really, you mentioned patterns, and it's really interesting how he picks patterns, because he, of course, he's incapable of speaking in a very clear way about a rule he has interiorized. But when he makes mistakes, I recognize that he's trying to apply a rule that he understood. And even when he doesn't mix a lot of languages, but sometimes he tries to, you know, he misses a word in Italian or in Romanian or in French, and like try to say something like with Italian patterns, but from the French words. And you see, okay, so you can see his brain at work, and it's really fascinating, because he's trying to apply a pattern that he has acquired from the, like you said, so the context, the fact that you repeat words, and like in your leader exercise with the Russian you did. So the context, and also the fact that you're repeating all the times the same words, and the question, so you understand the question, and then you can apply the same pattern of the question to another question or the answer. So this is also the natural way of learning languages, and I can observe that with my kids, and yeah, it's really fascinating.
So what you said was very interesting. I would like to add a couple of ideas. So the first thing I would like to say is about pronunciation. It's true that some people have a very nice pronunciation, but I also would like to highlight that it's a matter of priority. So for example, my pronunciation in French is much better, because I really wanted to have the perfect pronunciation in French. And it happened to me many times that people told me, "Are you French?" So they didn't even ask, they just implied that I was French. And at a certain point, when they find out that I wasn't French, then they were very surprised. So I think it's also a matter of priority. I don't think pronunciation is priority number one for me. So for me, it's very important in the sense that if I speak, if I knew that I'm speaking now and you couldn't understand me, it would be very important to me to improve that. But for me, the important part is not the perfect pronunciation. For me, is the perfect communication. Because normally when I go somewhere and either for work or for fun, when I talk to people, I don't judge people because the way they're pronouncing things. And if I knew that they were doing that with me, I wouldn't want them to be my friends. So the thing is that even for work, you see so many very effective chief executives who are not native speakers, but they can still work in a very proficient way. So sometimes what is important is more important is to be proficient in the language, in the sense that you can use the language to do everything you want. Of course, if on the top of that you want to invest other 50 hours on your pronunciation, of course you are welcome to do it, and it's possible to improve pronunciation for anyone. So it's but what I meant is that it's a matter of priority. So for some people, pronunciation was a priority. I know some polyglots who do not study anything but pronunciation for the first week or weeks. Of course, if you do that, if you are patient enough, because there is also lots of patience involved, because you have to bear with not being able to say anything for weeks. You just have to decide that your pronunciation is your priority. So I just wanted to reassure everyone, improving pronunciation is possible. It takes effort like any other thing. So if it's your priority, you can do that. The other thing I wanted to say is what you said about having languages being a part of your life. Of course, it helps immensely. So I lived in different countries. I lived in Germany, in France, in Spain, in Russia, and it always helped. But what I wanted to say is once more reassure, not everyone wants to speak a language at level C2. So sometimes people want to be able to enjoy conversations with friends, to go on holiday, to have conversations, to feel a part of it, but they don't need to understand every single word. So being a part of your life, for sure, it's so when a language is a part of your life, or languages, of course, it's the funniest, at least for me, the funniest way to use the language, the most efficient way, and so fast, efficient. What do we want more? At the same time, I also would like to say that I learned French without that. So, and French is for sure is one of my strongest languages. How did I do that? Honestly, I'm not that young. So the thing is that I learned French when there was no YouTube. So the only thing I would do is that I would go to France maybe once a year, but the rest I did it on my own with my books. And how did I do that? I put lots of effort in it. And of course, now maybe it would take me half of the time, okay? Because with other tools, so combining different tools, probably it would be quicker. But I want to say that even for people who cannot travel or cannot have a very, for example, now I'm in Germany and I live in a place which is not that lively and is not, it's international, but people stay at home, so it doesn't really help me. So what happens is that I think it's also to find your own way to integrate it in your life, into your life. And it also, for example, I remember for French, I used to talk to my sister in French. We were both learning French. We were trying, of course. If a French man would have listened to us, would have thought, "Oh, what is that?" But we were trying, and how can we learn through trying, through mistakes? So this is one way. The other thing, I was trying to write my diary in French. Fortunately, no one has to read it and no one has to correct it. So you can try if you want. So, and so there are different ways you can integrate the languages into your life. But the other thing I wanted to say is that, of course, it's the fastest way and in many cases very rewarding way. On the other hand, it's not the only way. because you can learn languages. If your aim is not to be fluent in 1 year or in 6 months, you don't need to do that. You can also go slower. Maybe you just enjoy the language, so you want to take it slower. And if you think that in order to speak a language, it has to be a part of your life, I think if I were a very beginner, I would feel overwhelmed. I mean, where am I going to find all these friends from this country? How can I find a way to speak it every day? So, according to you, to your method, to your life, to your preference, and to your goal, you can decide how much you want to integrate. Of course, once you want to reach C1, C2, it has to be a part of your life, at least for a certain period, because it's only exposure which brings you from C1 to C2. Because at that point there is no much grammar you have to study. It's more about learning new vocabulary, so that if that person coming from a different region talks to you, you still understand that person, and everyone has his own vocabulary. So the important thing is, a certain moment, the most important thing is exposure, and at the very beginning exposure is very important, so that you can progress very fast and you can understand much faster. But how fast you want to go depends on you.
Things that I really liked, and that in other interviews, maybe other language experts did not stress a lot, was the fact that you have to choose the tools and the material which are appealing to you, that you like. It's very important, because there are some people, I know some polyglots who are incapable of using apps or online courses. They really like books or audiobooks and classes. So I respect that. So and in the past I was using that. Now I'm using other tools. So when you have to learn a language, because you want to learn it, so not for your work. And let's say that tomorrow you want to learn a new language, and you have all the possibilities, all the tools at your disposal, because as you said, if you learn Hindi or Korean or I don't know, Tagalog, maybe you don't have all the things. Well, for sure, you don't have all the things you have when you learn English or Spanish. So, what are your favorite tools to start learning a language, to learn a language in general?
I think that the best tool depends on you. According to what I said before, the important thing is that you choose what you want to learn, in the sense, in terms of highest priority, the skill you really want to master first. We want to master everything, but we have to choose. I cannot learn at the same time. I don't know. I can learn everything at the same time, but still I have to have a priority in terms of what I want to learn. If I want to learn a language because I want to speak it, because I want to pass a job interview. So even a job interview, when you let's say that I wanted to have a job interview in Italian, I would still have to prepare. So this is why I think it's important that it is clear to you why you want to learn a language.
At some point you mentioned lists, vocabulary lists
Yes.
and so on. And well, I forgot to answer and to add a comment. I really like frequency lists, and also lists which are as you said, goal oriented. So like you have to travel to go to a country, maybe you prepare all the vocabulary you need, or maybe you need to, I don't know, to pass a job interview, to have a job interview, and then you prepare all the words and sentences you need in that specific situation. And on the other hand, I remember when I was learning ancient Greek at school, because I went to what in Italy they call the Liceo Classico, so it's like the literary side of the high school. And I was learning lists, with words completely useless and without any organization criterion. So it was like just, a memorization effort, but it was, well, in my opinion, it was completely stupid. And the other hand, I really agree with what you're saying, that, you have to be goal oriented. And in terms of lists, I really like frequency lists. So the words which are more common and that you can stumble upon more frequently when you learn a language. So sorry for the interruption. It just was because I don't. Otherwise, I forget.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
add that.
It's a pleasure.
Okay.
So now that you mentioned lists, I can say that I have a mixed feelings. So that I have a mixed feeling about lists. I think they can be very useful, but they must be really focused on what you want to learn. For example, I must say that since I studied linguistics and everything, so I know what frequency lists are. It depends where. So in order to have a frequency list, you have to have a corpora. A corpora is an amount of terms coming from a specific source. So normally, in order to have a frequency list, you have to decide what your corpora is. For example, all the newspapers published in that country at that time. So it's not random things which are coming inside. So frequency lists are very good, but only if they have a good corpora behind it. Because if the corpora are the news, I'm sorry, it's level B2 C1. So I don't need that frequency list, because once I work on that, because I looked for frequency lists online, and the ones that I could find were like even with verb, with I don't know, like with words, I wouldn't ever teach at A1, A2, B1 level. So it really depends where this list comes from. So if, for example, you talk about a list made of words, frequency, like probably you know what words are used very much at the A1, A2 level. So if you make a list according to that, to your experience and a specific context, for example, as I told you before, my aim is to talk to people. So what do I talk about? I talk about what I'm going to do next weekend, what I did last weekend. I want to know the same about the other person. I want to know about their hobbies, about their work. So now the context is much it's not as broad as before, and specific words regarding these topics are very good, but of course without the need to learn all of them. Because, for example, there is active vocabulary and passive vocabulary.
Sure.
If you learn, let's say that I want to talk to random people. Random people, I mean that I don't know what they like in advance. So I don't need to know all the sports. So if in lesson A1 I learn for Sinhalese from Sri Lanka, I learn 20 sports, I still cannot talk. But if I want to learn it as passive vocabulary, so that when I talk to people, they can tell me what they like, then this is a different thing. So I don't want to put all my effort in learning things that I cannot use myself, but I want to put effort as a passive vocabulary. So, and what you talked about space repositions, of course, this is very useful. This is what I think good courses are based on, that, provided the content is good, because if you repeat many times the things which are not good is also not good. But let's say if I, for example, what often happens is that in a traditional book you have some vocabulary in one chapter because it was a chapter about hotels, and then you will never see that vocabulary again. Of course, how can I remember it? I'm just frustrated at the end because I cannot remember it. So what you said, so I think that the tools like apps can be very efficient, very good, providing you use them in the right way. So if you use an app because you think that afterwards you're going to speak, I personally don't think so. I never met someone who learned speaking through an app, but I learned people who learn lots of vocabulary with an app. So according to what you want to do, so if you want to speak, you can combine your own learning, which allows you to speak, with vocabulary you need, because everyone is different. There are certain words which are common to anyone, like tomorrow, today, last week. Anyone needs those words or constructions, chunks. But there are certain things that only you might need. And for example, you have a child, now you need all the vocabulary about children. So you have two children. In my case, I don't know, I love sports, so I need more vocabulary. I love especially racket sports, so I need maybe more vocabulary about that. So it's really context specific. So I really think that tools, if you mean apps or something like that, are very, very good if you work with them with a critical eye, not critical in the sense of criticism, in the sense of, okay, it seems to be very good, but what I need, so, and use what you see in order to create your own lists and your own vocabulary, because if you really don't like sports, probably you don't go out with so many people who like sports, and then it's not really your topic. So, and I'm talking about beginners, because of course the higher the level, the more you still have to understand all that. So even if you don't like it, so I might not like fishing, but I still understand the vocabulary about that, because when I arrived at C1, C2 level, I think, okay, I will learn that too, but only if I talk to people who talked about that. I didn't go and research about that myself specifically.
Yeah, that's why I was. I really agree with when you were talking about the goal-oriented method. You know, to learn vocabulary, on to learn other things, and well, of course, I agree with you that a tool can be, and we even spoke about that on another occasion. The fact that an app, for example, can be part of an ecosystem where you learn from different methods, because as you said, for example, at MosaLingua we have a mobile app teaching vocabulary, but we give a lot of tips inside the apps, but we never said, we never promised you're going to speak the language only using the app. At some point we say, okay, now I don't know, 300 words, 600 words, maybe it's time to speak with a language tutor or a language partner to try to put into practice what you're learning. And then you can use podcasts, and then you can use the listening materials, and you need to, because there are different skills, different language skills, and sometimes an app or maybe even a course is very good at helping you develop that specific skill, but it's very hard to find something able to cover everything. At least I think it's, well, I don't know if it's impossible, but it should be an very complete and very big course, and maybe it would be even confusing for the learner, because as you said, we are different, we have different goals and priorities, and maybe it's better to have different tools like that. You can choose your priority. And while mentioning our app, it's true that we use frequency lists. If you want to be guided, just you don't have any idea, there is like a path. But as we are also language learner, because at MosaLingua, you have at least to speak one foreign language, and maybe two. It's better. You can always choose. You have categories. Sorry, you have different categories, and then you can say, okay, that flashcard on that category, I don't want to learn that, I'm not interested. And it was something that really mattered to me when we started to work and improve the app, because I think as you said, you have to enjoy the process, and you have to be free, because we have a lot of obligations and things in our lives that we don't like, because we just things we have to do. So when you learn a language, maybe a little freedom, a little this way of choosing yourself what you want to do, I think, sorry, choosing yourself what you want to do, it's important for the whole process, and to go, to continue to have results.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I really like what you said about your app. So this is really what I think could be a good complement, to a good addition to other methods. So you other channels. I call them channels because a language, as you said, I really like when you said that it's an ecosystem. So I everything works, but you can focus on certain things to make it work faster and better, and at the same time it's the combination of different factors. It's not only I can speak a language and I can focus on speaking, but I cannot ignore completely listening. I cannot ignore completely really depends where you live and which language we are talking about, but still I need to understand some signs, some SMS, so it really depends on the language, on the context, but yeah, so I really like the idea that you can decide I really want to learn that word or I really do not want to learn that word, and it is much better than what I've seen then in other apps where you cannot go ahead if you don't learn that word. So this is why, for example, in my courses, what I do is that I concentrate on really on vocabulary that everyone needs. So I cannot go into details like sailing, because I mean, how many people do you know? I know some people like sailing, but they are not the majority of my friends. So this is why I don't teach sailing in my course. But at the same time, if you want to combine, so I teach more language structures that you can apply by replacing the word that I teach you with another word that you really want to use. Like, I don't know, I teach you how to say I like doing and then you put the word you like if you don't like the activity I'm telling you, because the activity itself is not important, depends on you, but you can add it. So maybe your app would be a good addition.
I think that maybe sometimes it starts, from a noble intention. In some apps and some courses, they say, okay, they are so lost at the beginning that we need to guide themselves. But then it's a shame, as you said, that sometimes you don't have like an alternative path for maybe someone who is more independent or is capable of choosing his priorities or her priorities, to give this second channel where you can also be guided, or okay, I can learn what I need because I know better and I know my situation, because an online course, well, of course a language coach can adapt to that, because I will tell you. And of course also in an app, like we said, we ask, okay, what are your priority? Like you want to travel, you want to work, but of course we cannot like have a list of 30 goals, so like 40 50 goals, because that when you work with the human maybe it's you can tell that. And what are your very specific priorities? So yeah, I think we should always give the possibility to be free or to be guided, depending on the on the character of the person, of the attitude, and language background experience. Because I always say that if you have already mastered the language, this is the only, in my humble opinion, the only advantage that polyglots and language experts have, compared to like say people who never learned the language. They have a first success. They know how to. They understood how to learn a first foreign language, and then it's a matter of confidence and also of method. When they learn another language, it's easier. This is an advantage that they have. So for people who has a stronger language background, or who already succeed at learning a foreign language, yeah, it's better to be free and to choose your own priority.
The thing is that there is always room for freedom. There are a couple of things which are common sense, like you want to be able to speak and maintain these languages. At some point you have to speak them, so it's not rocket science. It's really about if you want to if you don't use a program for 10 years, you will not remember where the keys are for the program to do a certain thing you want it to do. So going back, guidance, I think is very good if you have never learned another foreign language before, or if you haven't learned in a way that you enjoyed it, and if you haven't learned in a way that makes you feel that you can progress quickly, or if you have doubts, can I learn a language? Then in that case, I think guidance is really good, because it's about discovering yourself, how you can learn the best you as a person. And there are certain things which work for everyone, as I told you before. For European languages, you really should know verbs, but you don't need to learn them in the exact way you hate. So you can learn them in a different way. You can learn them in a fun way through games. You can learn them by focus on certain things, by seeing patterns, by using them. There are so many ways, and that one depends on the person you have in front of you. you want to help. It really depends.
Elisa, thank you very much. You said a lot of very interesting things, and we could speak for hours. But well, I don't want to take you more time. So the last question is, where people can find you?
So they can find me. So if you want to find more about me, you can go to my website, speakfromj1withelisa.com. You can also go to my YouTube channels, which are Smart German for Busy People, Smart Italian for Busy People, or Passion for Languages. And also Instagram with the same names, Speak from Day One with Elisa, Smart German for Busy People, Smart Italian for Busy People.
We'll add the links in the description, so they don't worry. We will add some links for you, for people listen to us. Okay, so thank you very much again for your time, for all these useful tips. It was very interesting. Okay, so as always as I always do at the end of our video, so if you like this content, so add a comment, especially if you want more interviews with language experts. I used to do that a lot in the past, but then I made a post. So if you like those interviews, and I think the interview with Elisa was very nice, this conversation, so just let me know, and of course subscribe, like, and so on. So it's a little thing to prove that what we are doing here, what we are sharing, is valuable to you and you like. Thank you again, Elisa.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Have a great day.
If you learned something new from this video, give it a thumbs up. Then hit subscribe and turn on your notifications. Have a look around our channel for more hacks and tips. And if you're watching on another social media platform, like or follow our page. See you next time.